Okay, so now we're ready for question 3. You should have just completed this rationale for question 2. We are still in our cat passage. This, again, before you even look at the question, we're going to scope it out and scan. How is it printed on the page? In other words, what comes before answer choice A and after the passage? That's what we need to scope out. So I notice in sentence 5, and they're reproducing it below. So sentence 5 is italicized. I also want to be on the lookout if there's any underlined part in the italics. You're going to start getting into some questions that have at least one word, if not whole chunks underlined. And what they're doing with that is they're saying, you're going to revise this, or you're going to think about writing it differently. And so they're going to ask you to work specifically with that underlined part. This one, I noticed, just has one word underlined. So I know that they're going to ask me to somehow either write more after it or revise it in some way. So then I'm going to read, again, don't have to read, reproduce below. In sentence 5, I'm looking for the first verb. And the first verb is provide further evidence to refute the claim. That's my verb phrase. I don't need to know this writer wants to. Those are words that are going to get you like bogged down in time. So you're locating the location. That's easy, sentence 5. And then you're finding your first verb phrase. Provide further evidence to refute the claim. Okay, we need to be very familiar with this task. They'll ask us this a lot. Refute the claim. We want to go against the claim. So what is the claim? They are going to give us that. The claim is the domestication of dogs occurred when humans captured and raised wolves. Okay, wolves. That is the claim. So I know nothing about that topic, and that's okay. Don't freak out. You are thinking about reading like a writer, so you don't need to know the topic. You need to know how you can best support this claim, what language best supports the claim. Okay, so here is the sentence reproduced, and then I'm not going to read that yet. I'm going to jump to the question. Which of the following versions of this underlined part best does this? So I'm putting it into my own words. So best refutes the claim. So I want you to press pause. I want you to think through the different parts of this question. The task with the verb, that's the very first part up here. The italicized part with underline, that takes a sentence from the passage, that's in the middle. And then finally the question. I want you to put the question into your own words and be careful with thinking through refute. What are they asking you to do? So when you see the word refute, I want you to come up with another word for that that's a synonym that makes sense to you. Press pause to rephrase this question in your own words, and then we'll return when you get back. Okay, so anytime we have an underlined part, right, they're asking us to revise or think about it differently. So if I look through answer choices A, B, C, D, E, I notice that they all begin with hunters. I don't want your brain to even look at that first word. All it's doing is just reminding you of what's underlined. I want you to start noticing patterns by how each of the words start after the word hunters. All right, so this is kind of like what I call a plug and play. So you're going to kind of test out or plug in each answer choice to figure out, and then backtrack and figure out, does this go against this claim that domestication of dogs occurred when humans captured wolves and raised them? Okay, so let's do this with the first one, and then I'll have you do it for the other 4. Though always careful not to get too close to these hunters. So I see, I'm going to read the whole thing in my head. Although some argue that domestication took place when humans captured and raised wolf pups as pets, far more likely is it that some wolves began to follow human hunters though always careful not to get too close to these hunters. Okay, I want to point out something that I want your ear to start to listen to. That's a repetition of the word hunters that's clunky. It comes twice. It doesn't need to come twice. It's not fluid. It doesn't flow. So one of the things that you are testing is which sentence is the most efficient and not clunky and sounds like it flows, right? So the repetition of that hunters at the end is kind of odd to me. I'm not going to just eliminate it for that reason though, but I'm mentally going to put it as not my first place choice, right? So go ahead and just kind of stick that in your head that it's not necessarily the first choice that you're working with. Let's go to B before you do this on your own. I want to show you one more thing. Hunters, comma, who led a nomadic lifestyle. So if we're looking at that phrase, who led a nomadic lifestyle, that phrase talks about or refers back to hunters. It modifies hunters, right? It's telling us more about what hunters did. They led a nomadic lifestyle. I want you to read through choices C, D, and E to see which other one of these, or more than one, phrases also modify the word hunters, right? So you're going to read after the comma and you're going to think, is that describing hunters or is it describing wolves? So right now, pause and read through C, D, and E to see if you can find one or more that also modifies hunters and not wolves. So here they're asking you to pick up your writing skill, which is a little bit around grammar. And so if you were focused in on phrases that talked about hunters versus phrases that referred to wolves, you should have found that answer choice B, right, we just went over that, is a phrase that modifies hunters because of the comma who. So who directly refers back to hunters. Who led a nomadic lifestyle. Also, you can think, well, would wolves have a certain lifestyle? No. And then the other one that I'm noticing is E. Again, the same thing, who sometimes inhabited caves or constructed shelters out of wood. Well, I mean, wolves can't construct shelters out of wood, but also grammatically, right? Who is a modification for hunters and not wolves, plus who is for humans and not necessarily animals. And we notice that C and D does not have that who and is modifying or talking about wolves, right? So if we go back here, wolves began to follow human hunters, comma, drawn by, right? Or wolves began to follow human hunters in D, comma, sometimes for extended periods of time. Both of those phrases that come after hunters for C and D modify are talking about refer back to wolves and not hunters. So what are they asking us to do? They're asking us to refute, go against this claim that the domestication of dogs occurred when humans captured wolves and raised them. So I am always going back to that just to keep straight in my head what I'm doing. But I know that telling me more about the humans, that's not really helping me with refuting this claim that they captured and raised wolves as pets, right? We want to go against that. So that doesn't serve us. So I'm going to eliminate. Remember, we're focused on eliminating, not choosing the correct one, right? You're focusing on crossing out the wrong ones or finding the wrong ones. So I'm going to cross out B and E because I want more information about the wolves. And the reason that I want more information about the wolves, if you can just pause the video and think to yourself, why would I want to go with more information about wolves rather than more information about hunters? So you might even want to go back to the italicized sentence to see, why you would want to add more information about the wolves and not the humans. Talk about that or think about it out loud to yourself. Press pause and we'll return. The number one reason that I can think of that we want a reason why we want to talk more about wolves and not humans is actually how the sentence is written. So everything after this comma here, after pets, it's about the wolves. The wolves began to follow human hunters. We don't want to go back. We don't need that more information about hunters because the focus is on wolves. Everything here, right? After this comma. So you may have come up with a different reason, and that's great, but that's the one that I'm thinking of. Now that we've eliminated two of the answer choices, the E and the B, now we need to figure out what is going to help us go against the fact that humans captured and raised wolves as pets. We also need an explanation or a reason for why wolves were domesticated. So we need something that shows the interaction between humans and wolves. We just don't want it to be that the reason or the explanation that humans captured and raised them as pets. So let's look for something that kind of shows that there is some sort of a connection. A, though always careful not to get too close to these hunters. Okay, so I want you to pause and to think through the remaining A, C, and D to think which one shows that there's this connection somehow, but it's not because of humans capturing and raising wolves as pets. Okay, so you have your remaining answer choices that show a connection. I'm going to talk through that. I did not choose A for a connection because it says they didn't get too close to the hunters. So how would that offer an alternative viewpoint, which is the my viewpoint here, that they were domesticated, right? So I want an alternative viewpoint for being domesticated rather than capturing and raising. So I'm going to cross out A, and then C, they were drawn by the smell of cooking meat and the chance to scavenge. Okay, that does show a connection. It does point to a different way of being domesticated. So I'm going to put that on hold. Again, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just rationalizing it right now. That is the best one I can find. And then D, sometimes for extended periods. Okay, that's very vague. That doesn't help or kind of hurt. It doesn't help an alternative. What were they doing for extended periods? Why? So C is definitely more specific. I'm going to go with C as the one that I think offers the other point of view rather than humans capturing that, but that domestication did take place. So just to be sure, we're going to read the entire sentence through, although some argue that domestication took place when humans captured and raised wolf pups as pets. Far more likely is that some wolves began to follow hunters, drawn by the smell of cooking meat and the chance to scavenge. All right, so I'm going to go with C for the reasons that I named. I know this took a really long time to process out. This was a really hard question, and I want you to just notice if your line of thinking through and processing was similar or different to mine, and if it was different, how so? Did you arrive at the same conclusion? Maybe you have a better way of looking at it, and I'd love to hear it. If you were not arriving at C, I want you to carefully analyze what choice you did come up with or how you did differ than my line of thinking, and then begin to see how your line of thinking swayed from C, and to notice that. So go ahead and complete the reflection for question 3, and then you are finished with this practice test. So you'll be going back to the video that is on Google Classroom for you to go through all of the different writing multiple choice strategies.